the Director of Legal Policy at Stand With Us, is with us today in order to unpack the politicization of Jewish identity. Carly Gammill is the Director of Legal Policy for Stand With Us, and a woman who spends her life fighting anti-Semitism. Carly, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's so wonderful to have you in Jerusalem.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. It's my third time, and I can never get enough.
Oh, we're very grateful. In general, we're very grateful for the incredible work that you do. But Carly, I wanted to start by asking you, pre-October 7th, the rhetoric, the anti-Israel rhetoric on campus was all about anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. Anti-Zionism is against everything that's wrong with Zionism, because, of course, they conflagrate Zionism with occupation and apartheid and all the blood libels that we know. But after October 7th, Carly, is there any mistake? Is there any confusion as to the fact that this is anti-Semitism?
Depends who you listen to.
Okay. So please unpack this for us, because you're on the front lines every single day. We'd like to hear about what you're doing, but exactly why you think this is depending who it's coming from.
Yeah. So I think you're right to key in on the fact that you and I know there is no daylight between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. And you know who else knows it full well? Anti-Zionists.
Of course.
They know it full well, right? They attack who?
You mean the professional agitators on campus?
That's right.
Not the unsuspecting kids.
Correct. And that's what I say. It depends who you listen to, whether anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. But it depends who those people, right? The agitators that you just talked about, it depends who they're talking to, right? Because we see what's happening, right? We see that what happens here in the Middle East, what happens in Israel, directly impacts not just Israelis on campuses in the U.S., but Jewish students who are Zionists, right? And what that means, you and I both know, is that that's a part of their identity, right? That there's a shared ancestry. Their ancestral homeland to which they are indigenous is something that's just part of what it means to be Jewish, right? So you know that, I know that, and the people who traffic in this form of anti-Semitism know that. Here's who doesn't know that. What many people are calling useful idiots. I don't particularly like that phrase for the group that I'm talking about, because they're uneducated. They've been sold a bill of goods, right? They've been told, as you just mentioned at the outset, that Zionism is, right, and is inseparable from colonialism, apartheid, genocide, ethnic cleansing, right? That is all baked into Zionism.
Yeah. And
so those who support Zionism support those horrible, evil things.
Yeah.
And that's the only frame of reference they have for this word Zionism.
Yeah.
And so this is really what I've been kind of unpacking in some of the educational programs that I've been doing for administrators on college campus, and realizing where the disconnect is. And this is where it is. And, I can, if we have time for a short story.
Yeah, please.
I think it's really enlightening as to what's happening here. So I was doing an educational program for some DEI administrators on a university campus.
Gosh, you're brave.
It took some doing to get the yes.
How did you manage that? Wow.
We have phenomenal staff that stand with us around the country, and they are diligent and they are persistent, and they just keep knocking and calling, and
then they send you
and then they bring
their secret weapon.
That's right. So I'm doing this program, and I'm talking to these administrators about Jewish identity, and we're going to get into now, what does anti-Semitism look like, right? In order to understand anti-Semitism, attacks against Jewish identity, well, of course, we need to understand Jewish identity, right? So we start talking about Zionism, and I can kind of see the look starting to change just a little bit, And so as I'm going through this, I realize I need to be a little interactive here. I need to get some information from them, some feedback from them to make sure we're not talking past one another. So this is what I do. I say, okay, show of hands. When you hear the word Zionism, how many of you automatically, even if you can't really define it, explain it, automatically, somewhere in your mind, you think Jewish, the Jewish community, Judaism? Very few hands.
Really?
And that's what I thought. Wow, okay, that was unexpected. So then I asked another, show of hands, and I didn't think this was going to fly, but I thought I'll try it. How many of you hear the word Zionism, you associate it in some form with Christianity? Fewer hands. That made sense.
Makes sense.
So then I said, Okay, how many of you hear the word Zionism, you automatically think some relation, politics. Every hand in the room went up. Every hand. They did not connect it to Jewish identity. They did absolutely connect Zionism to politics. So then we start talking about...
So it's an ism, in other words.
But that's the thing. They didn't know that it was an ism connected to Zion.
Jews.
But they did, because they didn't...
They don't know what Zion is.
So that was my next question.
Right.
Hold on a minute. How many of you are familiar with the standalone term, without the ism, just Zion? Not one.
It's a name in America, isn't it?
I mean, you would think that they would at least have that frame of reference. Not one. So then we had to do a little bit of a history lesson. We had to talk about Zion. It's an actual physical location in Israel, integral to the history of the Jewish people. And so as we start unpacking this, they now, for the first time, have this frame of reference for, oh, so Zionism is an ISM added to a word that has its own meaning, standing alone. Now we can start to, so the same way that the light bulb was kind of going on in my head about, oh, here's the disconnect.
Lack of understanding.
I started to see the light bulb going on over their heads.
Wow.
Oh, so this is why it's not politics for Jewish students. And let me say this, Fleur, and this is fairly provocative, but I really do believe this is what was happening. They couldn't, until they had this information, they couldn't quite figure out, why is it that all these Jewish students are showing up in our offices and calling and emailing and complaining about Zionism? And why are the Jewish students so connected to apartheid, genocide, like what Zionism was for them, right?
And these are DEI directors in college campuses.
It's what they've been taught. You have to remember, what are they're products
They're
of
products
the
of their own system,
They're
of course.
products of the system, right? And so, I said afterwards to someone, I said, and again, this is not to make a comparison or create kind of a hierarchy or, but these students in many ways, they might as well have been walking in with their hands raised high and saying, I'm a proud member of the KKK.
Yeah.
These people out here don't like me. Do something about it.
Yeah.
Well, of course, these administrators are going, I don't particularly like what you stand for either.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're starting to see that, wait a minute, what I've been taught and told all this time about Zionism is not what Zionism is. That is not what it means for the Jewish
Carly,
community.
this basically attests to a very deliberate campaign that has been going on for decades.
Absolutely.
To delegitimize the Jewish connection to our land.
Absolutely.
Which is, of course, the basis of Zionism. Very deliberate. This is not by accident.
Yeah.
And what can we do about it now? Is it so entrenched in the psyche? I know you're doing this every day.
Yeah.
At what point in your day, in your week, in your month do you say, I'm getting somewhere?
Well, days like today.
Okay.
It's about exposing it. It's about having access, right?
Yeah.
I was recently invited, and I'm grateful for the invitation, to testify before a committee of the Senate.
Wow.
I chose to take my 5 minutes. You can
Yeah.
submit written testimony of any length, but you get 5 minutes to really distill it. And I took my 5 minutes and I focused it on this, that exactly what you just said, the concerted, well-funded campaign to politicize this aspect of Jewish identity, Zionism, and to unpack that and to expose it. And that's what has to happen. It's an uneducating, right? It's you've been educated, but miseducated.
So
and now we've got to deprogram that thinking. And
is that possible on a massive scale? Because the indoctrination is on a massive scale.
I think it is. Again, it starts small, but again, the access is there. It's growing. The opportunities to expose this, to talk about it, to really unpack it. Talking to you is fantastic, and obviously your audience, will hear this.
Yes.
But talking, in front of the United States Senate, a committee of that body, is important. And this is a message also. I'll tell you, part of the way that we scale this is, at Stand With Us, we work directly with students on campus, in high schools, in middle schools, and we make sure that the students that we're working with are able to articulate this message, are able to not just go into an administrator's office like so many have been doing and saying, hey, this anti-Zionist stuff, that's an attack against my identity. Why is that an attack against your identity? Can you talk about the shared ancestry of the Jewish people, your connection to Israel, what Zionism is, what Zion is? So all of this that we're saying right now, we're making sure that the students themselves have the ability to articulate that. And that's part of how you scale it.
I think it's amazing. Carly, do you think that the new administration is more helpful? They are, unashamedly kicking out the agitators, cancelling visas for foreign students that have been, leading these terrible protests that have gotten violent too many times. Is your job easier or harder?
In some ways, easier. Obviously there are critics, and the jury is still out in many ways about, where's this going to go? I know there are people who are concerned that is this going to blow back on the Jewish community?
Yeah.
And I understand where that concern comes from. Here's what I say to that. We have an administration right now who is serious about this issue. Mm-hmm. They have made it a priority. Maybe you don't agree with every tactic. And certainly, I am a proponent of the rule of law. And so, I want to make sure that that's what's happening. That's the way that it's happening. But there is no question that this administration is fed up with what has been happening in the United States, particularly on college campuses. And, you talk about the visa issue, and so many people say, that's a violation of free speech. I think this is a great opportunity to say unequivocally, absolutely no, it's not. These are, first of all, not citizens of the United States, right? Their free speech rights are not coterminous with the citizens, and they're not being penalized or punished for what they're saying. It's
what they're doing.
It's support for terrorism.
Support for terrorism, right? And harassment and bullying.
Right. And a violation of their visa terms.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think all of that's really important to understand. And for all of those reasons, there should not be any blowback on the Jewish community. And I will say this too. Many of the people within the administration with whom, I've had the pleasure of contacting and being in touch with lately are absolutely on that same page. But I will say this, or maybe I should say, pleasantly surprised to discover that many of them are extremely concerned about crossing every T, dotting every I, making sure that when they go in and ask for or demand information from a university administration, that they have a solid basis legally for doing so. And so I've really appreciated that from them. The commitment is there, and they are backing it in the way that they should. Rule of law matters.
From what we see from here, like you say, they're completely serious about this. Yeah. It's not performative. It's real.
Right.
And I think probably come to the conclusion, which is what I would have told them, is that this is really bad for America, because a lot of this anti-Zionist / anti-Semitic rhetoric is also anti-American rhetoric.
Yeah, anti-American, anti-Western.
Anti-Western, even democracy, which is crazy.
Absolutely. And if you look at, the students who are out there chanting, "We are Hamas," right? Well, all you have to do is go back to who Hamas says it is.
It is.
Right? To understand, yes, it's anti-Western. Yes, it's anti-democracy. So no wonder that's what's happening here too. And then, of course, from this side of the world, right, you've got spokespeople for these terrorist organizations thanking them.
That's no more obvious.
There's a clear connection there. Yeah. How much more clear can it be?
Yes, but it seems that people, they suffer from this confirmation bias. They're just entrenched in their own positions.
Sure.
And it's very difficult. So I think that's what you do literally is move mountains to get people out of their entrenched positions, like the heads of DEI, who see Zionism as something negative, and to educate them that is part and parcel of the Jewish experience, our connection to the land.
Yeah, and I'll tell you the kind of the upshot of the light bulb going on, right, is then the conversation can turn where it needs to okay, we're no longer relegated to the realm of politics.
I like saying you're an anti-communist or socialist.
Right.
That's how they saw Zionism.
Right. But it's important to understand what happens if we're only in the realm of politics when we talk about Zionism and anti-Zionism, particularly in the United States. Then that speech is protected, right? Yeah. Political speech, it's protected.
Exactly.
Right? And it also causes division.
Yes.
Which is exactly what they want, right? They want that division. Zionist, anti-Zionist. Yeah. This, as we said before, equals colonialism, apartheid, genocide, right? So this group over here, that there's a small vocal minority who know exactly what they're saying and doing, and they've brought along with them all of these social justice warriors, right, who say, who in their right mind would want to have anything to do with that? Of course I'm against that, and anyone who stands for it, right?
Yeah.
But once you start understanding, these people over here don't actually support all of those things, right? Because that's not what Zionism is. That's not what Israel is about. That's not what the shared ancestry of the Jewish people is about. This is just about what, for most Jews around the world, it's just what it means to be Jewish, right? So now we're in the realm of identity, which means now when there are attacks based on Zionism, we're in the realm of discrimination.
Yeah.
And now we can start talking about equality, equal treatment. And so the questions at this point start turning to, okay, so if this is about identity for these students, right, not about politics, and it's not about all these horrible, bad, evil things, okay, then when a student comes to us, right, and says, this is what's happened and this is an attack against my identity, what should we do? And so then we can have the conversation. Well, let me answer that with a question. What would you do if it were any other identity group who were being targeted? Would you, as an administration, put out a statement condemning that? If so, that's what you should do here. Would you offer support to the individual or individuals who have been targeted? If so, that's what you should do here. Whatever you would do for any other group whose identity is being targeted, you must do here. And so the questions at that point were really meaningful. And it was all about, okay, so what can that look like here at this university? And
wow, Carly.
And like I said, it was light bulb after light bulb, and it was,
I hope,
amazing.
I mean, we should make more of you and just send you out there.
Well, no, but that's why we do
like
this,
an
right?
army.
We
Absolutely.
have to scale it.
We have to scale it. Now, apart from educating people who have very little knowledge of where the problem really is, you're suing some people too, Carly.
Yes.
Who are you suing?
So, I'll have to explain the way that we do this at Stand With Us, right? So we recently, and recently meaning within the last couple of years, created a separate legal entity. It is a sister entity, if you will, partner entity called the Stand With Us Center for Legal Justice.
Right.
And so I direct those efforts along with my colleague Yael Lerman in our Stand With Us legal department. And that's the mechanism through which we actually file lawsuits. And it's a membership organization, which means that we are able to have students, professors, community members who are targeted by anti-Semitism in an unlawful manner join. They become members, and that gives the organization, the SCLJ, standing to sue and to pursue their
So like
interests.
a union, as it were.
Essentially, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So through that entity, we have lawsuits against MIT. We have a lawsuit against Columbia and Barnard. We also, those are the two.
These are class actions?
They're not
or are
technically
they
class actions.
Right.
No, it's just certain individual students wanted to be named, and those who didn't are proceeding through the entity, through SCLJ. Yeah. So those are our two campus lawsuits. We also have a lawsuit, I don't know if you're familiar, probably you are, with a couple of summers ago in Los Angeles, the Adas Torah synagogue kind of riot that took place outside of that synagogue as individuals were trying to access meetings that were going on there. There's a provision of federal law. It's little known. The law itself is a little better known. It's called the FACE Act, and it's the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. What in the world does that have to do with anti-Semitism?
It's probably to do with pro-life, pro-choice.
That's what you would think of, right?
Yeah.
And that was the impetus for the law. But at the time that it was enacted, Congress said, you know what? Let's put in a provision that also prohibits individuals from prohibiting other individuals from accessing religious houses of worship.
How smart.
And so we have a brilliant team of lawyers that we're working with and who are representing the SCLJ's members who were attempting to access the synagogue that day under the federal and California FACE Act.
And you're suing specific individuals.
We are suing their does at this point, the individuals, but the organizations that we're suing are Code Pink, Westpac, and Palestinian Youth Movement, who were the organizers that day.
Code Pink are everywhere.
They are everywhere, and they are no longer just about women's rights as they once claimed to
women's
be.
rights. They go to Iran and they say how wonderful it is over there.
Well,
shame they don't stay.
Yeah, they were actually, there was a presence of Code Pink individuals at the Senate hearing about campus anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
They're everywhere.
What did they had to say? There's not enough of it.
Right. Yeah. Could we please get some more?
How were you received in that Senate hearing when you were explaining what you've been educating others in the fact that Zionism is part of Jewish identity and therefore it's
that's not really where the senators wanted to focus their time. I wish that there had
You
been,
made them uncomfortable.
Perhaps. I really wish that they had asked some more questions along those lines. I mean, certainly you've got senators from both sides of the aisle, and so they want to know, which administration is doing better, and a lot of politics going on there. But there were a few of them who clearly got it. They understood, and so there were, I had fellow panelists alongside me who have their own views on these things. It kind of, runs the gamut, and so there were a couple of heated moments when senators who get what's happening basically said to other members of the panel, "This is ridiculous, right? This position that you're taking is not making students more safe." And,
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that there are some of them who get it, and then, like I said, there are others who don't want to. Right? I always think of, do you remember the movie Remember the Titans?
Yes.
Did you see that one? And there's a scene in there where one of the black football players and one of the white football players go into a restaurant. The white football players, the quarterback, takes them into this restaurant, and the black football players are saying, we're not welcome here, and he's like, no, come on in. And of course, they're not welcome there, and they leave. And he says, the quarterback says, I didn't know.
Idea.
And the black player says, you didn't want to know.
Yeah.
And I know it's a long-winded, but I feel that so often in this realm. I want to say to people, you don't want to know. It's not just that you don't know, you don't want to know. And I so appreciate when I run across the people who are intellectually honest enough to engage in a conversation, right? There are so many people out there who, if it doesn't fit their narrative, they don't have time for it. They don't have the capacity for it. But occasionally you will run across someone or a group, who will listen long enough, and they will say, it's not a 180-degree turn, right, from where they came into the conversation and now they're leaving, a proud Zionist, right? That's not the goal necessarily of all of these conversations. The goal is to have someone in that conversation come in thinking Zionism is all these horrible bad things, something along those lines, and ask questions and say, well, wait, so where did you get that? Or so what does this mean then about this? Or I've never heard of this, right? Those are wins, right? That means that there's an open mind, and now maybe we can actually have a meaningful conversation. The ones who can't be bothered because it's outside their narrative, you shake the dust off and you go find these other ones.
Well, God bless you for the work that you're doing, and God bless you for getting to the point, because I don't think a lot of people do get to the point when they see light bulb moments in front of them. Yeah. Now and again, I get a moment like that. I think because of the way things have organized themselves in terms of the communications war, people only see what's in their ecosystem, what's in their already frame of reference, and to kind of be able to make the smallest of shifts is completely meaningful. And so,
totally agree.
Well done for what you're doing. Keep up the great work. I hope the week that you've had here in Israel gives you a little bit more batteries charged to keep the work going.
Yeah, it always does. And the thing that I now more than ever just appreciate so much about Israel is just how complex life is here. I mean, in some ways it's, I being from the US, I come here and I just think this is not normal. Yeah. Right. And
running into the siren in the middle of the day.
I did that today. Exactly. I did that today, and it was like, okay, well, this is normal life. And then you go back out.
And then you go back, you have finish your coffee.
And the children are walking to school with their backpacks. And,
and you're like.
And it breaks my heart, but at the same time, the resilience of the Israeli people it's beautiful. It's truly amazing. And so, that's the other way. You ask, how do we scale all of this? Again, I don't know exactly how we get this done, but people just need to come and see and experience for themselves.
The more, the better.
No substitute.
I completely agree with you. The more people that come and see, the better. Yeah. So let's see how many people we can get here. Yeah. Carly, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.